If you've been to any kind of flowing yoga class, you've probably come across this transition pose. It's called Chaturanga, and its English translation is four-limbed staff pose. Very long-winded. It looks kind of simple. It's like a little transition from one pose into the next, but it actually is a really tricky one. It requires quite a lot of strength to do this correctly. And when it's done incorrectly a lot of times, it can prove really damaging to your shoulders and your rotator cuffs. So let's quickly look at Chaturanga, how we're supposed to be doing it, how we might be doing it a little bit wrong, and what we can do to build the strength there so that our shoulders can continue to do it safely going forward. I've talked about Chaturanga on this channel before, and I think I referred to it as my least favourite yoga pose. And I mean, that's not exactly true. When it's done correctly and when I feel like I can do it well, I love it. I think it's a really great strengthening pose. It feels really powerful. However, I've been practicing yoga for a long time and I can still only do it really well, maybe like a couple of times in a class. After that, if I get a bit fatigued, I end up cheating and doing it a little bit wrong. And when I'm teaching Chaturanga, I tend to see this in students as well. If we don't have a lot of strength in our upper bodies or our cores, or if we just don't have a lot of awareness of how we're holding our bodies, then we can very easily get this pose a bit wrong and put a lot of pressure through the shoulders. So here's what it tends to look like when we get it a little bit wrong. We dip the shoulders down, the bum stays quite high up, and you can see that the shoulders are ending up taking a lot of pressure, and then we have to go from that position to kind of rolling up into upward facing dog, which is usually what comes next. So the correct way to do it is like this. It's very, very strict alignment. We come from a plank position where the body is in this really strict straight line. We lower down halfway, kind of like a half press up. And then we are supposed to stop there just for a moment in that strong halfway position, the body in pretty much a straight line. Elbows go to about 90 degrees depending on flexibility at the wrist. And then from there we transition through and up to usually upward facing dog. So if we don't really have quite enough strength in our upper body or our core, then we do end up coming into this dipping down of the shoulders and kind of scooping up into upward facing dog. And in some vinyasa classes, you might end up doing Chaturanga upwards of like 20, 30 times within an hour. So if you're doing it in the incorrect way and putting strain through your shoulders 30 times within a class, and you're doing that class multiple times over the weeks, months or years, chances are your shoulders are really going to start to feel the impact. So how can we do it a little bit more strictly, or how can we start building that strength? I've got two ways that I would recommend you to build up your strength for Chaturanga. And what I really urge you to do first of all, before you try either of these, is film yourself doing it. Because proprioception, which is our awareness of what our body is actually doing without looking, so if I look the other way and I move my arm around, proprioception is my awareness of where that arm is in space and what it's doing when I'm not looking at it. So our proprioception, when we first start yoga and movement practices, doesn't tend to be that good, but yoga teaches us proprioception really well. We get to understand how we're holding our bodies in different postures. So film yourself in Chaturanga and see if your body is doing what you think it is. Because you might think you're in that strict straight line, and then when you look at the video, it might be a little bit different, or maybe you are actually nailing it already and you're doing it perfectly. But if there's a little bit of that scooping action, or maybe your bum is just staying a little higher than your shoulders, then here's the two things that I would recommend you work on. Option one is to drop your knees and do a half Chaturanga. This takes a lot of the weight out of the shoulders and means that you can practice going to that halfway position and keeping your alignment so that your head all the way down to your knees is a straight line. Practice holding in that position, elbows squeezing in, shoulder blades retracted, and then transitioning up to upward facing dog from there. So each time you come to do a Chaturanga, drop the knees, find that strict half Chaturanga position and work from there until it feels natural, until it feels strong and steady. The second option, which is what I actually like to do every time I practice and is what I tend to instruct in my own classes when I'm teaching, and this is going from plank position, really strict plank position, straight line through the body, slowly and with lots of control, lowering all the way down to the belly. This builds so much strength through your core, through your arms, your upper back, really your whole body is having to be very switched on and engaged to do that controlled lower to the ground. And then from the ground, you can lift into either cobra, keeping the hips on the ground, or you can lift all the way through to upward dog, where the hips might lift slightly away from the ground, that higher back bend position. And actually, added bonus doing it this way, when you're coming from the ground all the way up into cobra or upward dog, you're building even more strength in lifting from the ground to upward dog rather than from that halfway position to upward dog. So there's even more strength to be gained doing it this way. I know it can be really tempting, especially if you're in a busy class, to kind of push through the pain or push yourself to keep going through that kind of scooping chaturanga movement because that's the way you've always done it, or because that's what you see everybody else doing. But in yoga, we try and practice ahimsa, which means non-harming. This means really looking after our bodies in the way that we move through the practice. So take your time, be patient with your body, and build up gradually with chaturanga by trying one of those two options. You're always allowed to make the practice work for you. And if your teacher asks you why you're doing it, you can just explain, I'm just looking after my shoulders today, so I'm going to do it this way. You are totally entitled to do your practice your way as long as you're being safe. Let me know in the comments below any other poses that you would like me to talk about, any other yoga asanas that you struggle with or you're not quite sure if you're getting right, and I will do my best to talk about them on this channel soon. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this helps you in your own practice. I'll see you in another video very soon.